So recently I was at a contemporary art exhibition called Prolonged Emergencies. It was an art exhibition focusing on the various existential threats facing all of us these days. Everything from the climate crisis to nuclear stuff to the genocide in Gaza and so on. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. It was genuinely blowing my mind. It was art assembled that had been made all the way from 2004 up until as early as last year, or rather as late as last year, I suppose, and it blew my mind. It got me thinking about what contemporary art can do in a whole new way. And it really got me thinking once again about the conversation around abstract art. We had this conversation a little while ago here on this channel talking about abstract art, people's thoughts on it, and the idea of disparaging abstract art, namely. I was never happy with that conversation. I mean, it was probably well over 100 days ago by this point, so I suppose that it's a little old, and I wanted to redo it after seeing this exhibition, after thinking about this, because it got me thinking about a lot of things. One of the other things that got me thinking about this, namely, was going through these museums with friends. I rarely go through museums with people. I kind of don't like it. I mean, maybe it's like just me pretentious maxing or whatever, but I find it to be kind of an annoying experience to go through a museum with people. I really like to go on my own to things like that, but I was with people, and being with people in museums displaying more contemporary art really was interesting because seeing the thoughts of my friends who are, not at all into this stuff versus mine, versus the way I viewed all this really did shift my perspective on all these things. This is going to be, by the way, a series of takes. This is not going to be me coming with one big proposal about contemporary art and where it's going in the eyes of consumers, more so why I think some of these problems arise. And then the first thing I want to say here, something I was thinking about, is that I think that contemporary art is going to someday, contemporary and modern, I'm going to use the term somewhat interchangeably here, these more modern forms of art that are broadly disliked, I say, by just general people. I do think 100% that someday they will be adored. I do think that. I think that whether the near or distant future, people will come around to these things. And I was thinking about that because of what one of my friends said as we entered the museum. He was like, I don't like anything that is modern art. I only like up to Van Gogh. Now, obviously, you guys know a lot about art. I'm sure this rings some alarm bells in your head. Van Gogh's a modern artist. Van Gogh is not at all a artist that is not modern. He's definitely a modern artist. And another friend said something very similar. He said, I don't like modern art. I only like up to Picasso. Once again, Picasso died not too long ago, actually, less than 100 years ago. Picasso was alive on this earth and fairly young. Around my age, I believe, if I have Picasso's age right. Don't know Picasso's age, but let's say it was. He was a young guy not too long ago. Picasso is another modern artist. And I was like, that's really interesting that their interpretation of what modern art is one, wrong and skewed, and two, very different than what every older person I've spoken to is. My friends are around my age. They're a couple years older than me, but they're Gen Z, right? Every person I've talked to who is, let's say, millennial Gen X about this has tastes in art that are a little bit older, right? They let's say they go right up to a Van Gogh, and they won't go there. And I do think this is something that sort of happens where with every generation, you see them embrace styles that the generation before them didn't. And I do think, and this is totally just me thinking stuff up after having a conversation with friends. I don't have historical evidence here for any of this stuff. This is not something I've researched. That would kind of go against the spirit of this show. That'd be for a video essay if this were to end up being one. But I really was thinking maybe, just maybe, that it's something that's just going to take time, right? And I was thinking about consensus reality in relation to modern art. I know, kind of a curveball based on what we were just talking about, but I was thinking about this because looking at the exhibition I was in, that I had an amazing time, and one of the best things I've ever seen, you finding it interesting depended on you understanding the things going on in the world. I mean, if I was not interested in the in global news and global affairs, I'd be walking through that exhibition like, oh great, another video of some stuff. And you don't understand, looking at it without at least reading the placards in front of it, or having a knowledge of these things, how good it is. I'm not saying all contemporary art is like that, but I do think it's interesting that like this contemporary art, and much of it that I see is oriented around that. Many artists are focused on speaking on things going on right now. And I think, I mean, as great as that is, I think artists throughout history have always been cultural commentators. I don't think this is a bad thing, but I think it's harder to speak on the modern day when there are so many disagreements on what that even means, right? Like, the idea of speaking about the climate crisis is much more complicated when half the people don't believe in the climate crisis, right? The fact that we no longer have a consensus reality is kind of putting a big damper on the idea of making art commenting on our reality, right? And also, I want to go along with it with another train of thought here. A conversation I had recently with another friend who's way more into the arts than maybe even me. I mean, he knows a lot of artists that are currently in museums. He is way more into the scene than I am, right? He said something lately that I found very interesting. He was like, there's a crisis within artists of what to paint right now. And I don't know what that means 100% in terms of like directly, you know, like obviously I think a lot of artists are having a fine time figuring out what they want to paint, but I think what he does mean sort of indirectly is how they're going to comment on everything going on right now, you know? And namely, this has to do with the main thing that's sort of broken our consensus reality here, social media, right? When you have everything at your fingertips, what's the point of looking at something? And going down this train of thought got me really thinking about, you know, what is going on here, right? Like, what is going on with the idea of painting right now? Because, like, maybe this is a little weird to say, but I was thinking about the fact that every image ever is at my fingertips on my phone, and that, like, you see so many images in a day, like, so many. Like, how many things have you seen today? I think the average person sees, like, thousands of advertisements in a day, let alone things on social media. You know, it's so noisy, there's so much stuff going on, you can make anything at your fingertips now with AI, and I was like, it's kind of a funny thing to sit in my room with, just silently, with myself, and spend time on an oil painting. Like, it's kind of a weird thing to do that at this point, right? Because, I don't know, like, doesn't that feel like a weird act? I guess I don't know why it feels so weird to me, but something about that feels like kind of a weird act amongst all these things, amongst the fact that we don't have a consensus reality anymore, amongst the fact that every image on earth is at your fingertips. The act of painting alone in a room, in silence, or with me talking as I do here, and putting time into each stroke to make one image seems weird. And I don't know if it feels weird as in outdated weird, or weird as in more important than ever before weird. I think that it's probably one of the two. You know, I think if you ask the average person rather, who's not into art, I think they would probably say we need painters less than ever before because of all these things that I'm mentioning here. I think if you ask the average painter, they would say we need painters more than ever before because of all the things I mentioned here. And that once again goes back to the idea of the fact that nobody can really agree on these things anymore. And I think that's hurting what modern art is. Along with that, I want to just avoid that conversation entirely. I think it's interesting, and I think it can play into some things. I want to set it because it's an overtone for the main conversation around abstract art, but I do just want to talk about this idea, though, that the average person doesn't like the modern art. I think that's very interesting, because people like art. Like, I don't know a person. I know 9 out of 10 of my friends will not go to the MoMA. Here in New York, they will not go to the MoMA, they will not go to the Museum of Modern Art, they will only go to the Met. They only like the Met, right? They go nothing against the MoMA, just not my stuff in there. I don't like that stuff, right? All of them, 10 out of 10, love the Met. They will go there, and I could literally stop recording this, text them right now, they would be there. They love it so much. Everybody likes art. I am willing to actually bet money that you cannot find somebody who's like, actually I've met one person ever who like philosophically hated art. And I've never spoken to them since. I actually didn't speak to them. It was somebody that one of my friends met, and they actually, shout out to my friend, they called me right away rather, and were like, hey, I just met somebody that I know you're gonna wanna have a conversation with, and I argued with this person on FaceTime for 45 minutes, and then I hung up the phone and got mad. Great time, great, this was like a year ago, great, right? aside from that person who is evil, in my opinion, I think you're just evil if you're like, I dislike art. But aside from that, everybody likes art. So once again, I come back to the conclusion I did have in that original episode that like, maybe it's on the side of the artists here, right? Like this idea that people are just too dumb to get modern art seems a bit silly, right? Clearly there's something more going on here. And that brings me back to this idea that there is a need for like a mid-level thing. Like a lot of people who are younger like the Van Gogh, they like a little bit of abstract impressionism, right? I don't think it's wrong at all to say that like there is a lack of artists doing things like that, right? You want some stuff that's a little more like that. The art world doesn't like things that are recyclical. I don't think people who are going to museums, I know for me, like as somebody who, you know, this Prolonged Emergencies exhibition was a bunch of contemporary art. If I went in there and I saw a bunch of stuff that looked like stuff I'd seen before, I wouldn't like it, and I'm somebody that's into art. So I think that goes to show, like, people in the art world do want more new, fresh stuff, right? However, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that people averagely do want, like, stuff that's a little bit more of a tone they understand, right? Of this sort of abstract impressionism that a lot of people seem to like. I'm gonna say though, too, and this kind of goes along with what we were talking about with cultural apathy the other day, I think that if you gave people this, they also would not, like, at all enjoy it. Like, I don't think, like, a lot of people are like, I wish the 80s were back. I wish I missed the times when, you know, people were power walking or whatever bullshit they think they missed in the 80s, and like, blah, 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 right? If you ask the average person, though, if they watched the last, you know, 80s throwback music video or 80s throwback movie that every studio's doing, they probably didn't. They actually don't miss the 80s. They miss, you know, they clearly, it is not the 80s that these people directly miss. Because if it was, these things would be the biggest thing on earth, right? I'm willing to bet that as much as I do hold my original conclusion, that maybe we need some people doing, you know, mid-market things, or not mid-market, mass market things that are of a, you know, highbrow paintings or whatever. You can still have your pretentious painting like I do, but like it needs to be a little more of people's reference point. Well, I still hold that fact. I still agree with that. I also am interested in the idea of like, what if you did that and people just didn't like it? What if people didn't care? Because as much as, you know, same principle with the 80s. People don't want the 80s back because the 80s were some sacred time. They miss the idea of having something new, right? Something new that they can understand. So is the solution to this idea of modern art not being as consumable to the average person, is it to make things that are old again? Or is it to make something new that is more comprehensible in our fractured reality of that our new reality that has a bunch of random things going on and nobody can agree on what reality looks like? I'm willing to bet it's the latter, right? But earnestly, what the fuck does that mean? Like genuinely, I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that looks like. How do you, if we're covering this idea that people are having trouble enjoying these things because there's a fractured reality and they also don't like the stylistic ideas of them, how do you then maneuver in this fractured reality and also make something that is new and appeals to all these people? I think then people would like contemporary art. If you could do that, yes, people would love contemporary art. I 100%, I have no doubts. Like I said, all my friends like art. No reason they wouldn't like the contemporary ones if you could do that. That is an impossible task though, as far as my approximations go. You know, I think the reason I feel so great bringing you here for an episode of Paint Talk is because I know that a bunch of artists watch this, and I think some of you might have an amazing answer for what that looks like, what it means to do something like that. For me, though, I got nothing. I think it's an insane question, and it earnestly does have me, pondering the idea of what if social media just made art no more? Like, what if genuinely the way that we disseminate information makes it now so the idea of art in its classical form of a painting that you spend time making to say something is no more. And the only way an artist could ever be big is through, some other way. Like a lot of the bigger artists now that like are known, in a public vein, are known for doing collabs with brands or stuff like that. They're not really known for their art, like Labubu is probably the biggest artist on earth right now. Casing Lung, was that his name? Who does the Labubus? nobody knows his name, they know the Labubus, right? And that's only because he made it a mass market thing, right? So like, would you argue the Labubus are the solution? Are they speaking to our cultural moment in a way that nothing else is able to? And like, they're doing a really great job of that. And by being a, consumerist fashion item, they're making a meta commentary and things. I don't think anybody would actually argue this, but I mean, like, by the rules we've set up, it's the closest thing we actually do have to it. That's undeniable. So this is where I at the end of this video, ask you guys, what do you think is going on? How do you think we make things that people enjoy the same way they once did? I do think that it does have to do with our lack of a consensus reality. I do think it does have to do with some of the stylistic techniques. And I just think we need something that is new and easily understandable. Not easily understandable, but like, nothing's really agreed upon anymore, It's not that it's easily understandable in a way of like, make a fun duck, because people like ducks. Not that kind of easily understandable. Easily understandable in that it'll have mass appeal in this new fractured lack of a consensus reality. That's what the question I'm interested in right now. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What, you as artists, whether you make music, whether you make blah, 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 what do you do about that? Yeah. So that's all. This is the painting, going in with red today, and man, is that shadow ugly. That shadow on the bottom, that is an ugly shadow. That really is not good. I like what I did in the back though, taking some of this black. The black is way too black to be a shadow, but I think it's cool to take some of it and dot it in the back like that. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the red. I've always liked red, and it's cool. It's not my favorite though, it kind of bores me a little bit. So go check this out over on the Instagram, and until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint Duck episode 239, and until next time, here every morning, painting and talking with you all.